Greetings Internet, how have you all been? How has 2020 been treating you? Today I wanted to talk about a variety of different things. The current situation, what it means for the movement, and lots of other shenanigans. So without further ado, let's get into it. So as this is an in all honesty video, it's going to be a lot less structured and a lot less robotic in a way. These videos are sort of an opportunity for me to speak my mind about all different types of things, and so that's what we're going to do. It's kind of an understatement that 2020 has been a dumpster fire for a significant number of people. You know, you have the pandemic, you have the economic downturn because of the pandemic, you have the civil unrest going on because of that, not to mention other issues that are causing unrest as well. You have people being lonely and isolated because of the lockdowns that, while not the perfect solution, they had to happen as a temporary stopgap measure, else the virus would have just spread out of control. It's been rough. Now, fortunately, in the area of my home country where I currently live, it's not nearly as bad as some other areas. We're not feeling the full brunt of the crisis, whereas other areas such as the northern UK are getting hit pretty hard. In my area there's still cases, but it's not too extreme, and although I may not know anyone personally that's been impacted by the virus itself, I do know people personally who have been impacted by the economic ramifications of the crisis. Moving on from that, an interesting question to ask would be how the current situation impacts the community ecology / resource-based economy movement. And I feel it's kind of a mixed bag. You see, on one hand, you have this pandemic, which is hampering people's ability to organise and spread awareness and do all those sorts of things. That has the potential to slow down the movement, slow down our progress towards getting more people together and building this new system. But then again, on the flip side, the crisis also exposes the flaws, the fragilities, the contradictions of our current social order. Now, this can do either of two things. It can either make people want to stick to what they consider a safe option when it comes to their politics and their worldview. These people might desire more moderate forms of leadership. However, what can also happen is that exposure to the inherent flaws of our current system can actually make people more conducive to alternative systems and structures and ways of doing things. I think that once this crisis has somewhat subdued and people are exposed to the realities of our current paradigm, RBE advocates such as myself will have a really good opportunity to make our case to a large number of people. I think that post-COVID, people and groups advocating different systems and ways of life will find much greater success, due in part to the failures of the current system in addressing the pandemic. Not to mention that, bar a few countries, world leaders have not done a spectacular job, to say the least, in dealing with this crisis. In many cases, the economy is put before the people, which is why a lot of governments are very hesitant in instigating lockdowns. In my home country, for example, after the initial lockdown was lifted, kids were told to go back to school. We were told to eat out to help out. Pubs, bars and restaurants were allowed to open, all without a widespread testing system in place. Instead, people are told by the government to follow some vague guidance, possibly to create an illusion that something is being done. The onus is put on individuals and organisations to protect themselves from this virus. Am I asking for more government intervention? Not necessarily. I'm not asking world leaders to be more authoritarian. I'm calling for their responses to be more organised, an area that is in desperate need of improvement, in my view. If you want my take on how we should deal with this crisis, then I suggest you go and check out my health and healthcare in an RBE video, which I uploaded last month, I believe. Now, let's take a look at how some notable members of the public have responded to this crisis. While thankfully the vast majority of people do take coronavirus seriously, others do not. And in fact, some are even skeptical that there is a crisis to begin with. Particularly those of the conspiratorial type. I have read and heard some of the most dumb as rocks arguments and utter vitriol throughout the course of this pandemic. I have literally heard someone shouting out on the street, comparing wearing a mask to mind control. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Throughout various forms of social media, I've seen some lovely arguments, like how the virus was created in a lab, or even going as far as to call COVID a hoax. And of course, the either ignorant or unashamedly ableist anti-vaxxers are naturally out in force. Where all these conspiracies stem from is when people hastily make all these connections without filtering it through the sieve of logic. I know this is me going on a tangent here, but take the whole RFID thing for example. Now, there's two main types of RFID tags. There's passive and active. The active ones are the ones that you can actually power through a battery source. However, they're a bit unwieldy in terms of concealing them in a small object. Now, what most conspiracy theorists are concerned with is RFID implants, and these are of the passive type. They're the same things you get in stuff like keycards, and essentially it's a tiny chip, perhaps complemented with some auxiliary components, that's attached to a coil. When in close contact with a receiver, the thing that the RFID interacts with, the receiver sends a signal which induces a current in the coil, thus powering the device. That's it. There's no other way to power a passive RFID. Now, you might be wondering, what about beta voltaics? The thing about beta voltaics is that you can't really use them to power a RFID. They just don't generate enough electricity to run the thing. With beta voltaics, you're not even dealing with milliwatts of power, you're dealing with microwatts, which is absolutely tiny. And people who spout conspiracies about this, saying, oh, it's the mark of the devil and whatever next, they don't take any of this into consideration. And it's a similar case here. We know that COVID is zoonotic. We first thought it came from an animal called a pangolin. We now believe the origin to be closer to bats. Although the measures in China were strict and draconian, they effectively controlled the outbreak within a reasonable amount of time. Now, unfortunately, they weren't able to do this before the new pathogen spread to the entire world, and thus we have the situation that we have now. Now, a conspiracy theorist might come up to me and say, oh, you're in support of the establishment, you're brainwashed, whatever. And my response to this is simple. You can be critical of any given system or establishment or structure or what have you without being conspiratorial. You don't need a conspiracy to point out the flaws in our monetary market system, especially during these times. Everything you need to make a solid critique of capitalism, especially now, is right in front of your eyes. All you have to do is look at the interests of the majority, the interests of the elite, and the interests of the planet we live on, and extrapolate from there the contradictions and rifts between each. It's as simple as that. No conspiracies needed. Now, the so-called COVID skeptics, along with anti-vaxxers and other people, have been taken advantage of by scam artists who have jumped on the bandwagon. There are people who have a track record of administering non-treatments for pretty serious illnesses. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you just have some people who just want to get people to buy their book on alternative medicine. Now, I'm not saying all alternative medicine is bad. What I'm saying is that most people who use the term alternative medicine are typically referring to non-treatment such as homeopathy? What? That thing on the screen right now, which is obviously fake science that's been debunked numerous times. Yet these people are still being taken advantage of by con artists who exploit people's desperation in time of need. This is another side effect of capitalism, by the way, for the record. As CERBE advocates, therefore, it should be part of our duty during this crisis to help educate people in a scientific manner what coronavirus is and how we have the best chances of culling this pandemic, so that yet more people do not get swayed by misinformation. What we should also do is point out the contradictions and inefficacies within our current system, and from there argue for a better system that would deal with the situations like we're in now much more effectively. And as always, we should all be doing our part to stay safe, to protect others, as well as protecting ourselves. With all that said, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Considering the time of the year, if I upload any more content, I don't think it will be anything big. My next video will be the second installment of my RBE transition series, which I'm going to hold off until next year. For now, I might work on my blog and get that up and running, and perhaps I'll make another short video. But until then, catch you guys next time. Thank you very much for watching, and especially during these times, stay safe. Have a good one.